Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video we'll be going through the Kill Team FAQs, taking a look at the errata and the designer's commentary for all the kill teams, the core rulebook, and even the compendium. We'll be finding out if they fixed those walls and clarified the rules. Can this guy go through a wall? And can this guy go through a wall? That's the most important question. So let's dive in and we'll start working through them all, starting with the core rules, then the compendium, and then going through all the individual factions, reading through the errata and designer's commentary for each. If you're new to Kill Team and haven't seen how these erratas work, then basically any new text that's been amended will be highlighted in blue, and you can see here that the text, there's big chunks of blue all over the document. If there's anything that's been updated since the previous errata, then there'll be an asterisk before the page reference, as you can see with this section that's got the rectangle in green around it. For the core rules, this is errata 1.4, so it's had a few amendments already, so we're not going to go through everything, we're just going to pick out those ones with the asterisks before them. It's quite a bit to go through, but I'm not going to rush through it, so let's take our time, chill out, and just enjoy these new updates, and hopefully it'll give you a good idea about what you can expect for your kill team, and also the ones you're going to be playing against, because it's not just learning about your team, it's learning about your enemy too. Really important to know what they're up to and what they can do. So let's get started with the core book then. So this is the first amendment, and this is page 62, the charge action. We've just got to add the following bullet point. If an operative has a rule that allows it to perform a charge action while within engagement range of an enemy operative, it can move out of engagement range of enemy operatives, but must still finish that move within engagement range of at least one enemy operative. So that makes sense. We know to make a charge, we've got to finish the charge within engagement range of an enemy operative, but we can actually start it while being within engagement range for certain operatives. So that's really cool, makes sense, and yeah, not much more to say about that really. Before we move on to the next update, I'd just like to say a quick thank you to Firestorm Games for sponsoring the channel and helping me to keep going with these daily videos. It'd be awesome if you could check out their website. I'll put a link in the description down below, and that'll take you there where you can save up to 20% on all your games, not just Kill Team and Warhammer, but Star Wars, Dungeons and Dragons, you name it, they've got it there. So it'd be great if you could check them out, and a big thanks to them for sponsoring the channel. The next update is for page 69, control and objective markers and tokens, and we need to add the following sentence. During operatives' activations, determine control of objective markers and tokens at the start and end of each individual action. So not at the start and end of the activation, but each action. So you might do something, well, let's just say at the beginning, you might not control an objective marker, and then you do an action, and maybe you incapacitate an enemy operative and they're removed, and then you could re-look at the situation, because you could actually then be controlling the objective marker. I've been playing that anyway. It kind of made some intuitive sense, which is a big thing to say about these rules. So there we go, though. I think that makes sense and clears it up if you were doubting how that worked. Alright, next we got page 99, Spec Ops campaigns, gaining experience. Add the following to the relevant part of the second bullet point. If an operative completes any mission actions in a battle, excluding the operate hatch action, we're tying it into the dark now, and or earn. So you just got to add that little bit in there. So yeah, not a massive deal there, and if you're playing the Spec Ops campaigns, that's going to be just a slight update to add to it. Next we've got various kill zone Gallo Dark terrain rules. This is wall trait, so I thought this might be where we get some confirmation on the walls and how they work, but it's not. It's something a little bit different. We have to change the fourth bullet point to read distance cannot be measured over or through wall terrain. You must measure around it using the shortest possible route as shown in the diagram below. So that's the same, but this blue bit's different now. We have to add this. However, measure distances to areas of the kill zone through walls, for example the centre of a kill zone or drop zone, but not objective markers or tokens. This certainly makes sense that we won't measure to an objective marker or token through a wall, because our operative cannot control it. They can't see it, they can't get to it, they have to move to be, within white or black of it or whatever, but they have to move around the wall so they can get near it. So you can't do it through a wall. But this is really just to clarify with things like if you can place something that a distance, for example, from the enemy drop zone, or if you want to put down your barricades 6 inches or within 6 inches from your drop zone, you literally take that measurement through the wall. So that's the little slight difference there. The next change is for close quarters, and we've got to add a big chunk here. And it says some tactical ploys allow one or more operatives to be set up outside of your drop zone. For example, Sneaky Git Commando and Dimensional Translocation for the Hyrotech Circle. This is a big one for me. I've been playing the Commandos all through October, and I'm gutted they've changed this. This really spoils things. I had a great play that worked out before they made this amendment, and it was awesome because you could play that Sneaky Git tactical ploy. You could get one right in there at the beginning, anywhere on the battlefield before you started, so you could really nab an objective quite early. And it looks like they're not happy that can be done, so they've changed it slightly. So now in a battle that uses close quarter rules, so outside of close quarter rules, we can still do it as normal, but just in the into the dark Gallo Dark kill zone, the close quarter rules, you cannot do this. But instead, you can only use such tactical ploys once per battle at the start of the first firefight phase, and they allow one operative specified by the ploy that is wholly within your drop zone to perform a free normal move and or operate hatch action before any operatives are activated. So although they've taken away the thing that was really cool about the Commandos, you can still do something here, so you can still get a slight advantage, because if you put them right by a door, you can do a free normal move and or operate hatch action. Doesn't say in what order, so you can open that hatch and then do a normal move through it before any operatives are activated. So then you could activate that operative and then they could move again because it's not part of the same activation. So that's not so bad. That I could still work with that, and I suppose it's fair enough, but that was one of the strengths of the Commandos when you consider they do have a lot of weaknesses. To take that away, I feel that's a bit mean, but I would say that because they are my favourite kill team at the moment. Alright, now we're on to the core rules designer's commentary. This is 1.5 version, and there's no changes here, no updates, so we don't have to worry about this page. Actually, I'm wrong there. We might have to worry about it. If you've never looked at these updates before, these erratas and designer's commentary, then you may not be familiar with this. So if you're new to the game and you've just been playing out of the core book that came in the Octarius set, then this is going to be important to take a look at, because you will have to update that book if you want to play by the updates. Of course, you could just stick to the rules in the book as they are, but if you want to be current and you're playing other people who are using these, then it's certainly worth checking them out. But I'll put a link down below anyway, so you can go to the Warhammer community site and find all of these to read through in your own time, because if you haven't checked them out, you will need to read all the paragraphs, not just the ones that are in blue or with the asterisks. Okay, designer's commentary page 2 does have some updates, and here it tells us there's a new question. So if an operative's characteristics are modified during an action, does that impact the action it's currently performing? For example, if an operative's movement characteristic is modified during a normal move action as a result of being injured. And they say no, unless otherwise specified, apply the modifiers once the action it's performing is complete. So I think that makes sense too. And you continue the action, complete it, and then apply any modifiers to it afterwards. Next, there's a question: some rules clarify that a modifier should only be applied if an enemy operative is activated within X of the relevant operative. For example, Rust Emanation's strategic ploy for the Gelapox infected. Only subtract white from their movement characteristic as a result of being injured if they are activated within engagement range of that friendly operative. And then they ask, what does this mean? So the answer that came from Games Workshop is that do not apply that specific modifier unless the operative is activated within X of the relevant operative. In the example, movement would be the specific modifier. I don't think this is a really good answer to that question. They're just almost feeding the question back as the answer. Yeah, don't like that answer, to be fair. That's a complete word salad all the way through. I'm really not sure what to make of that. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section below. I think it just answers itself. That question is quite self-explanatory. Next one. Does an action performed when an operative hasn't been activated count as an activation? For example, Overwatch or a free dash action from Recon in the scouting step. And they clarify the answer is no, it doesn't count. So that's great. And that makes sense, as we were just talking earlier about the commandos and how you can do that sneaky gits tactical ploy. They've changed it so you can do the movement and or operate hatch action before any activations take place. So that just clarifies that further. We're on page 4 now, and here it asks if an operative carrying an objective marker or token loses the ability to perform the pickup action during the battle, and the example they give is Unleash Demon from the Legionary Anointed, what happens to that objective marker or token? And the answer is the operative must drop it. I find this quite weird, because if they're carrying it and then they lose the ability to perform the pickup action during the battle, I would have thought they'd lose the ability to drop it, because drop is tied in with pickup in the description, although drop-in doesn't cost you any action points. But it says here the operative must drop it. I also think that they have already picked it up. So this is a bit weird to me. Again, this one, I'm not sure if this makes complete sense, because if they've picked it up, they won't need to perform the pickup action again, unless they want to drop that and then pick something else up. So yeah, a little bit weird, but you know, they do state it quite obviously, they must drop it, so that's what we'll have to do. Right, we're still going on page 4, and as you can see so far, sometimes these questions just raise even more questions even when they're answered. But here we go, let's keep going. If an operative performs an action during another action, for example, an operate hatch action during a move action, which we can do, you can open that hatch halfway through a move action and then continue moving. When can they be interrupted for things like a guard attack or the Phobos strike team in cursor, marksman, track, target action? That was a mouthful. Right, the answer is, after that operative performs any action, even if another action is still ongoing, and in the example, you could interrupt them after they perform the operate hatch action, or after they fully perform the normal move action. So I guess they've got to wait till the end of an action. So if you were going to move part of your movement, you haven't finished that move action yet, then you open the hatch, so you do finish an action, which is the operate hatch action, and then you continue moving. They are allowed to interrupt after the operate hatch action, so that makes sense too. It's just at the end of the action. Looks like some quick fire ones next. Question for the plant ban attack op. Can an operative that cannot perform the pickup action be selected to carry the banner token? The answer is simply no. Then we've got, when using the sentry's mission rules, when do you determine line of sight for raising the alarm? And the answer is before and after an action is performed. Operatives can move into line of sight during an action, but the alarm isn't raised unless they start or finish that action in line of sight. I like the sound of this one. I guess, you know, if they're stood still and then they start an action and they're in line of sight when they start it, the operative on the sentry is going to notice them. They're going to notice that sudden movement from an object that was stationary. And likewise, if someone just stops moving out in the open in pure view of an operative who's a sentry, then they're going to see that too. But if you're just scuttling across and you start and end out of line of sight, then you're good to go. Next question is, for the Duel of Wits mission, the Critical Operations Mission Pack core book, do players have to select different objective markers to be a priority objective marker? And the answer is simply yes. So if you were wondering about that question, that's been answered nice and simply there. Now we're on to page 5 of the commentary for the core rules, and this is definitely taking up the largest section of the video, and things will get quicker as we go through all the different factions, but this is the important one because these core rules are going to apply to pretty much everybody, so yeah, important to go through them. I think the question here is, in Killzone Gallowdark, the wall trait, this is what we wanted, here we go, the wall trait says operatives cannot move over or through wall terrain regardless of any other rules other than as a result of the accessible trait. The questioner then goes on to ask, do you really mean this? Or can operatives move through walls as a result of rules like breach for the Commando Breacher Boy and breach point for the Imperial Navy Breacher Hatch Cutter? Now the answer is yes, we really mean this, which is really annoying, but we'll cover that in a second. As unique as it might seem, allowing certain operatives to move through walls breaks a fundamental feature of Killzone Gallowdark. Therefore, it's prohibited in order to maintain the experience and balance that we feel is appropriate for this kill zone. So that answers the question that a lot of us have been asking once and for all now. No, the Breacher Boy certainly can't go through the wall, and even the Imperial Navy Breacher Hatch Cutter cannot go through the walls, which is exactly what he was designed to do and why he was included in the box set and was even shown to do it in a battle report on the Warhammer Plus channel. I'm sure that's what happened there. So yeah, really annoying. They obviously tried it out, realised it was too OP and then changed it. But that was the whole point of having the hatch cutter in there. That was his purpose, and that made it really interesting. And so to take that away is a bit weird, but you could certainly homebrew it and still include it if you want to and still use those rules. There's no reason why not. I don't think it completely overbalances things. It's nice to have a little quirk like that, and who cares if things aren't entirely balanced anyway. And any time two opponents go into a battle, like you know, I know this isn't real life, but if you're in some kind of battle, there's always going to be an advantage and disadvantage to one side or the other for sure. So why not represent that with little quirks like that? I don't see a problem myself. Certainly would be fun to do homebrewing, and if you're in a competitive environment though, obviously you couldn't unless everyone agreed. It is important to note, though, that this is for Killzone Gallowdark. So when we're taking our Breacher Boy and that Hatch Cutter and, say, playing with Octarius walls, we can bash through them as long as they're not more than black thick. So we can carry on doing that, which is awesome. I love doing that with the Breacher Boy. So fun. I'm dwelling on this rule a little bit because this was really important. This was a big deal, I think, for me. I don't know if it was as big a deal for you, but let me know what you think in the comments section below. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. We've got quite a few more to go through on this page, so here we go. On mission maps that use Killzone Gallowdark, does the position of hatchways indicate which direction the hatch should open in? And they say no, they simply identify the orientation of long walls and hatchways. And setting this up at the beginning was really annoying because it did look like they were meant to be on that side, but after a while you realise no, they're actually not meant to be. So I'm glad they've clarified it here, but feels a little bit late. They could have done that early on or just put a little note in the book, because the way they position it in those maps, when you first start, it really does look like that's the way it's meant to go, and they must have realised that when they were designing it. Sometimes I feel like I'm always like moaning about things with Games Workshop, but I think it's valid because they're such a big company. There's such a process involved with checks and things, and we're paying quite a lot of money for all these products. You'd expect these little things to be covered and not skimmed over. So yeah, I think the criticism is valid, and yeah, we're entitled to. Certainly when we buy all these things, we're entitled to criticise it for sure. Right, next up in Killzone Gallowdark, does the hatch of an open hatchway provide cover, and is it obscuring? Yes, treat cover lines that go underneath it as crossing it. So I think the book was pretty clear on that and how that worked. So yeah, but this just clarifies it a bit more, because you could say, I can see underneath it, so I can see the feet perhaps, and so does it still cover? So I'm glad they clarified that here. Next up, in Killzone Gallowdark, how do you resolve rules that require an operative to be within a certain distance of heavy terrain? Yeah, this comes up, and this certainly came up with the Ork commandos, and so the heavy terrain would be like a wall feature, so we could use that, no problem, but here it's making it very clear which parts we can use. So it says, resolve this by only using pillars and wall ends, excluding wall ends for hatchways, and heavy terrain from a Killzone Gallowdark supplement, for example, ancient apparatus. So we can only use pillars and wall ends, and then heavy terrain from a Killzone Gallowdark supplement, for example, ancient apparatus. But heavy terrain is walls. Their feature is heavy terrain. So can we use the whole wall, or are we only using the pillars within the wall? I still don't think that makes it that clear. And also, where it says pillars, does that mean a pillar in the middle of a wall, if you know what I mean? Let me know what you think about that too. Be interested to hear your take on it. Next up, this whole page is pretty much updates, so quite a lot for Into the Dark here. It's not covering the new Shadow Vaults though, so just be aware of that, but I think the terrain's going to cross over quite a lot. So this next one is for close quarters. How does the guard action work when the operative must perform a shoot action with a specific weapon, for example, Bolted Discipline, Exalted Astartes, Dakadash, etc. And it says that the operative can perform the guard action so long as the relevant weapon is selected if it performs Overwatch or point blank Overwatch during the subsequent guard attack. So yeah, I think the answer is just reflecting the question again. I think it just really makes sense that you use the weapon you have to use and use that for Overwatch. Can an operative equipped with a ranged weapon that has the heavy special rule perform a normal move, fall back or charge action, then perform a guard action in the same activation? If so, can it subsequently use the heavy weapon for the guard attack? That's a good question, because it certainly feels like you're doing a normal move and then you're declaring the guard action in the same activation. So you'd think you couldn't do it, but I think because you're carrying out the guard action when you're interrupting the opposing player's operatives, then it's not really treated as doing that guard action in your activation, even though you started it in your activation, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's cool. That's a really good one to clarify. Alright, we're on to the next one. And by the way, I should say that I'm just reacting to these, so don't take what I say as gospel. I could certainly be very wrong about a few of these. I've been wrong about so many rules with Kill Team, but playing it more and more, you get used to it and then you correct it and hopefully don't make the mistake again. But yeah, I am just reacting to these and just giving what I think is the interpretation of it, but you could see it different. And if so, please let me know down below for any of these. It'd be great to hear from you. But anyway, the next question is, if an operative incapacitates an enemy operative in a hatchway fight action, can rules that take effect when an enemy operative is incapacitated in combat within engagement range or black still work? They give an example here, the rob and ransack tac-op, and then the answer is simply yes. So there we go, that clears that up nice and easily. Next up, can an operative perform a hatchway fight action as a guard attack as a hatchway fight action is treated as a fight action? And the answer is yes. I struggle with this question. Can an operative perform a hatchway fight action as a guard attack as a hatchway fight action is treated as a fight action? Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. That's really confusing me. It just makes sense that if it's a fight, it's a fight. These rules can be so weird. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. If I interrupt an enemy operative's activation with guard, but then cannot complete a guard attack, is the operative still on guard? For example, there could be no valid targets, such as if a novitiate player uses the blinding aura act of faith. And the answer is yes. So if you can't complete the guard attack, the operative would still be on guard, so then you can complete it later on. That's the core rules. That's the biggest chunk of all the updates now, and quite a lot of that was to do with Into the Dark, wasn't it? So yeah, that really covered a lot of questions. I'm sure there's a ton more that they haven't answered there though. But now let's move on to the compendium. Page 1, nothing, no updates there to be concerned with. So let's have a look at page 2, and here you can see we've just got to add a little bit and change page 156, Lurk Strategic Ploy for the Hive Fleet, and we've just got to change the section in blue, regardless of any rules that treat the operative as having an engage order, e.g. vantage point. So that should clarify that bit. And that's it for the compendium. So that was really easy. Now we'll move on and start looking at all the individual factions. So here we've got the Corsair Void Scarred. This is the Designer's Commentary 1.1. So we've had an update previously. This will be the second update, and there's a question here. For the purposes of the Plunderer's strategic ploy, how do you determine the closest objective marker if one or more hatchways are closed? And it says always determine the closest objective marker as if all hatchways are open. So that could be a really good benefit for them, and nice to clarify that there. Now we're on to the Ork Commandos, ERRATA 1.3. We've had a few updates here, and it says in close quarters, page 41, blow it up, tac-op. This tac-op is not in use when the close quarters rules are in effect. This particular tac-op is on page 41 of Kill Team Octarius' book, and it's simply saying we can't use that one when we play close quarters rules. So when we're playing Into the Dark with the Gallo Dark kill zone, we can't use this tac-op. And now we're moving on to the Designer's Commentary. No changes there for the Commandos. Next up are the Legionary, and so this is 1.1, so the second change for them, and we've got update here, page 35. Dark Desecration tac-op is not in use when the close quarter rules are in effect. This is the close quarter rule, and you're going to find the tac-op in the book that the Legionary came with. So that's just like they did with the Orks. They're taking a little bit away from them when playing in close quarters. And there's one question and answer in the designer's commentary for the Legionary. How do interruptions after an operative performs an action, for example guard, work with the perpetual aggression strategic ploy? And the answer is to treat the move as a separate action. Therefore, the Khorne operative can be interrupted after fighting in combat before or after it moves from perpetual aggression. Now on to the Pathfinder, designer commentary at 1.1, close quarters again. Question: for the purposes of determining if one less attack dice is rolled as a result of the condensed environment rule, when a drone operative is protecting a friendly operative as a result of saviour protocols, do you draw cover lines to the protective operative or to the drone operative? And the answer is to draw those cover lines to the protective operative. So there we go. Hopefully that clears that one up too for you if you play the Pathfinders. Now we're on to the Phobos Strike Team. There's quite a few changes for these actually. This is one of the Kill Team that is getting a lot of updates. And to start with, we're in the Kill Team Morok book. And it says on page 39, Infiltrator Helix Adept, Combat Restoratives Ability. Change the relevant part of the first sentence to read the first time another friendly Phobos Strike Team operative would be incapacitated. So a slight change there to that on page 39. On page 41, the Infiltrator Voxbreaker Voxbray action. You change this action to an ability and it doesn't cost any action points. So that's really nice. That's a nice little save in there. Here's a big change on page 43 for the Incursor Mine Layer Haywire Mine Weapon. I cringe when I see this much text, but here we go. Change the stun critical hit rule to the following. Interference. Each time a friendly operative makes a shooting attack with this weapon, in the roll attack dice step of that shooting attack, if you retain any critical hits, 1. The target cannot move any further during this activation, and 2. Subtract 1 from the remaining action points the target has for this activation, if any. If it's outside of the target's activation, subtract 1 from the number of action points it generates in its next activation. Note that this is not a modifier to the target's APL characteristic. I'm glad they clarified what happens if it's outside of the target's activation, because that's come up in a game I played before where I had to take away or subtract 1 action point, but they'd already activated, so I didn't in the end. But it's nice that they've clarified that there, so that's really good. Now we're on to the Phobos Strike Team designer's commentary. The question asks, if I interrupt an enemy operative's activation with track target for the Incursor Marksman, but then cannot complete the Overwatch action, for example there are no valid targets, such as if a Novitiate player uses the Blinding Aura Act of Faith, can I interrupt again in the turning point? In other words, does track target remain? And it says yes. If you change the Incursor Marksman's order to perform the unresolved Overwatch action, change it back. So this is similar to the question that was raised earlier on, and again asks about the Blinding Aura of Faith from the Novitiate. So yeah, that's just pretty much the same as the previous question, I think. Veteran Guardsmen get a question in designer's commentary. If a tactical asset is used, but there are no valid targets for it to be resolved, can I cancel the asset and use it again later in the turning point? And the answer is yes, you can. We got the Void Dancer troop, nothing new there, and nothing in their designer's commentary either. So let's move on and take a look at the Warp Coven. And so the errata, that stays the same, no updates. But in the designer's commentary, there's a new question. With the changes to the Exalted Astarte strategic ploy in the balanced data slate, can a gunner operative perform a shoot action and then a guard action? And it says yes. But there's a condition. Yes, if 1 additional action point is subtracted to perform a guard action. So there we go. I kind of hoped they would get some more things taken away from them, because they're really difficult to play against. There's some tough cookies. They've got so many cool abilities and special rules that overlap. I think they'd be really fun to actually play rather than play against. So yeah, this is one kill team I'm looking forward to trying out soon. Next up, we've got the Wormblade Designer Commentary 1.2 new question. For the purposes of the Cult Ambush ability, when a Wormblade operative makes multiple shooting attacks from 1 shoot action, for example, Blast or Torrent, do the re-rolls apply to all the shooting attacks from that action, or just the first one? And the answer is, it applies to all of them. Now we're on to Gelapox Infected, great looking kill team, really fun models, and this is the first one, the designer commentary 1.0, so anything on here would be new, I imagine. I hope I'm getting that right, because I am going to go through all of the ones that are 1.1, so I hope that's correct, but here we go. This is a question for Vulgrar Thrice Cursed, can only be added to your roster or datastate once. In narrative play, if this operative is slain, does that mean I can never add it again? The answer is no. In such instances, you could add this operative again, but you cannot have more than one of this operative on your roster or data slate at once. I guess that makes sense. You can always have one of them on the data slate, and as long as that one's dead, you can bring another one in, no problem. Next up is the Imperial Navy Breacher, again 1.0, and so here we got some changes for the kill team into the Dark Book on page 40 for the Navis Axejack. Change the power weapon to a melee weapon, nice and simple. Page 41, Navis Endurant Breach Wall ability, change the relevant part of the final sentence to read, unless the enemy operative is at least white higher than it. I think they really should have added something extra here for the hatch cutter rule, just to make it super clear what they mean and that it can't go through the wall, because it does say that you have to be within a certain distance or black of the token, not the wall. So you're moving through the token and not the wall in that case, because they've cut through it. I think a bit more clarification would have been good. But there we go, not to worry. Let's have a look at the designer's commentary for the Navy Breaches, and here the question asks if an operative is under the effects of a rule that prevents it from activating and or treats it as having a group activation characteristic of 1, for example, Omni Scrambler for the Phobos Strike Team, can I still use the Breach and Clear ability to activate that operative? The answer is straight up no, you cannot. Now let's have a look at the Intercession Squad. I loved these rules when they came out. Brilliant rules. It got me back into the game with a kill team I really had fun learning the game with properly. And so yeah, I was dreading what they would change actually, because I think they got it quite right with the Intercession Squad. But here there's a question, so that's not so bad. If a rule treats an operative as being injured regardless of any rules that they say they cannot be injured, for example, Rust Emanation Strategic Ploy by the Gelapox Infected, does the methodical chapter tactic still ignore the ballistic skill and weapon skill characteristic modifiers? And the answer is no, it doesn't ignore them. That's quite a specific rule to bring into play there. I wonder how often that comes up against the different kill teams. But shame if you choose that methodical chapter tactic there, then you still have to act as injured for your ballistic skill and weapon skill characteristic modifiers, when usually you wouldn't. So yeah, that is a bit of a shame, but I think that could be quite a specific one. Right, next up they ask, if an Intercession Squad operative is incapacitated during its activation, can I use the Wrath of Vengeance tactical ploy freely, or do action restrictions still apply? The answer they give is that action restrictions do still apply. So for example, with Bolter Discipline in mind, if the operative has already performed 2 shoot actions during that activation, you could not use Wrath of Vengeance to perform a 3rd shoot action. So yeah, I like that makes sense. Now let's have a look at the Elucidian Star Striders, and this is Designer's Commentary 1.0, so all these are going to be new, and this is from the Kill Team Manual 2022. The question is, if a privateer support asset is used, but there are no valid targets for it to be resolved, can I cancel the asset and use it again later in the turn point? Yes, you can. They also ask, when using the well-drilled tactical ploy, can I select another ready friendly operative as required, but then subsequently use a privateer support asset instead? The answer is no. In that case, you cannot. And then finally, we've got a question for Elucia Vane. I never get these names right. Can only be added to your roster or data state once. In narrative play, is slain, so you can have it again. So no, you can add this operative again, but you can have more than one. So this is the same as what we saw for the Gelapox Infected. So basically exactly the same. You can have one in there. If they die, you can put one more in, but never more than one. There's a quick update to make for the Farstalker Kin Band in their first errata 1.0. This is for Kill Team Into the Dark, page 60, Piercing Shot and Toxin Shot equipment. Add the following to both. Unless the operative is equipped with a Kroot rifle, this ranged weapon has the ranged red special rule. So there we go. So that's going to maybe change it so we limit the range. That would be a bit of a shame, but yeah, we've got to add that in there too. Now we've got the designer's commentary for the Farstalker Kimban. I've got the wrong thing up on the right, but I can still read it. Kill Team Into the Dark question. Does the Mercenary Contact tactical ploy allow you to select a TAC-op from any unselected archetype or only from the unselected archetype the kill team has access to? And it says any unselected archetype is okay. So that's cool. There we go. Next, there's one new addition for the novitiates. On page 40, Acts of Faith, Faithful Blessing, change the relevant part of the first sentence to read, when a friendly novitiate operative is fighting in combat or making a shooting attack, or a shooting attack is being made against it, in the roll attack dice, step for the former, or the roll defense dice step for the latter of that combat or shooting attack, re-roll one of your attack or defense dice, respectively. Big word salad, but I think that makes it clearer. It must have been very confusing before that they've had to add all that in. But there we go. Hopefully that clears things up if you play novitiates and you've come across any issues there. As we move into the designer's commentary, the question asks, if an enemy operative is incapacitated at the end of a turning point due to Inferno tokens, does this count for the Purge with Flame TAC-op? The answer is no. It must specifically be the attacks that incapacitate them and not those Inferno tokens. There's another question here. If an activation is interrupted, can an additional act of faith be used during the interruption? For example, if I use an act of faith during a novitiate operative's activation, then the activation is interrupted by the Phobos strike team track target action. Can I perform another act of faith during the track target's Overwatched action? The answer is no. You can only perform one act of faith between the start and end of the activation, before, during, or after the interruption. So that's very specific, isn't it? But there we go. Again, I hope that helps you out. 2 updates to go, and this is one for the Blooded with the ERRATA 1.0. And here on page 55 of Kill Team Morok, Traitor Brimstone Grenadier changed the Diabolic Bomb to a ranged weapon. And finally, we've got the Hunter Clade, the White Dwarf issue 468. For page 67, the Sicarian Ruststalker Assassin Transonic Blades changed the attacks characteristic to 5. I just checked the White Dwarf issue 468, and wow, that's a really good buff for them. They went from an attacks characteristic of 3 for those Transonic Blades, now up to 5. That's a big deal, so that's really cool. I think if you're playing them, you've got to be happy with that update. And there we go, that's covered all the Kill Team FAQs now. We've gone through all the errata and the designer's commentary for all the factions, the compendium, the annual, and for the core books. If you made it to the end of the video, let me know in the comments section below. I told you it was going to be a long one, but we got through it, and so now we should be up to date with all the new rules for Kill Team, and hopefully you got some good changes for the Kill Teams you like to play. I'm a little bit disappointed they've ruined my Sneaky Gits tactics, because that was awesome. That was really fun to include in Into the Dark, but I'll have to revisit that now and think about how I play them, because that was a really cool thing to be able to do. So that's a bit of a shame, but otherwise, no big deal. There's not really any major changes there, is it? But let me know what you think down below, and if you like the video, please hit the like button, subscribe for more videos like this one, and don't forget to hit that notification bell too to join me here next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who make these daily videos possible, and if you're interested in joining the community, it'd be awesome to see you there, and I'll put a link for that in the description down below.